Well, good morning and welcome to your next Menopause Morning. Typically 9 a.m. Pacific time every Tuesday. And today I'm really excited to talk about something that is a huge issue for probably yourself if you are in perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopausal, which is fatigue. And it's a very common symptom. I see it in my practice all the time. I mean, I've literally been working with menopausal women for the last like 20. Let's say I've been in practice for 25 and a half years, so 21 and a half years working with women with menopause. And I've looked at over last time I counted 8,137 test kits, and that number grows every day. And what I can help you also understand is that, it's literally about 2 million women enter menopause every single year here in the US. And only about 10 to 15% are asymptomatic, so not dealing with symptoms. Well, that means that about 85 to 90% are dealing with significant symptoms, one of them being fatigue, and that could be you as well. If you're watching this, it probably is you, right? So it's just the understanding that there's underlying factors is why you're dealing with the fatigue. And I want to show you a couple of simple understandings. Is First off is that what I want you to think about is if it's about 15% or 10 or 15% of the women don't have symptoms, short of like the two true symptoms of menopause is you don't have a monthly cycle and you can't conceive anymore. Yeah, but the other symptoms that you're referred to as menopause symptoms, the weight gain, the sleeplessness, the fatigue, the hot flashes, the brain fog, the fatigue, as I'm talking about today, that list all goes on. Yeah, but those are not really symptoms of menopause. They're symptoms of a hormonal system that cannot maintain proper hormone balance as you transition from childbearing years into perimenopause and then menopause and postmenopausal. And really what I'm going to show you here first. So when we're looking at this picture here, when you see the most common focus for most doctors and even most holistic doctors is the focus on progesterone, testosterone, and estrogens. Right now, the big problem with this is that that's not fixing the system. But that could actually help with your symptoms. But you still want to fix the system. So when we're talking about fixing the system, you're talking about supporting your vitamin B5, which is a big key because your body uses B5 to convert into a coenzyme called acetyl-CoA. And then your body uses that coenzyme and your own production of cholesterol as the two most significant raw materials to produce the very first baseline hormone in your system, which is called pregnenolone. I always refer to that as the mother hormone because every other hormone produced is a conversion from pregnenolone. But then if you look at the pathway that goes straight down, where it goes from pregnenolone to DHA and then finally to testosterone and estrogen, that's all about conversions. And the same thing in the other pathway where it goes from pregnenolone into progesterone and cortisol and cortisone and cortisol. Those are all conversions. But it really all starts with the B5, the pregnenolone, and the DHEA. Now I bring that up because I bring up another picture here. So now when you don't fix the system, because the system overall, when we're talking about, and when I mention the system, it's really how your brain, your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your adrenals all work collectively together. And that system is responsible for everything on this particular picture you're looking at. Now, today I'm mostly focusing on fatigue. So if you look at all the way on the right of this, where it says underneath the CHO metabolism, it says cellular energetics. So that system is responsible for cellular energetics, which is energy at the most basic level for you. So if you have menopause, if you're in menopause, perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopausal, and you're extremely fatigued, it could be due to the system itself, not really having the vitality to maintain the level of cellular energetics that you're really looking for. Now, the other ties into this that will tie into your energy, you also have to look at it from the perspective underneath where it says neurotissue health. You'll see where it says quality of sleep. right? So this is another big problem for potentially for yourself if you're dealing with menopause symptoms, is you're just not getting the sleep you used to. Maybe there's trouble falling asleep, or maybe you fall asleep fine, but you don't sleep well through the whole night, or maybe you feel like you're getting a good night's sleep, but you're not waking up feeling refreshed anymore, which tells me you're not getting into that deep restorative sleep and having the proper sleep cycles. Well, if you're not getting the sleep you need, you're going to feel fatigue, because, and it's not just the lack of sleep that's the kicker there, is that when your body is sleeping, your body does a high level of maintenance and repair. So during a proper sleep cycle, there's a certain level of immunity that is actually triggered to help your body maintain and repair itself. Well, if you're not getting that maintenance and repair, and you're not getting to sleep, you're going to be feeling fatigue. And one other kicker on this is also tied into neural tissue health, is when you get into a deep sleep, and it sounds funny, but it's true, like your brain actually shrinks a bit when you get into a deep sleep cycle. Now, where that's a benefit is when your brain shrinks. It's kind of like, think of a sponge. So if you have a sponge and then there's water in the sponge and you squeeze the sponge, what happens? The water comes out of the sponge. Well, that's kind of what happens with the brain, but instead of water, we're talking about toxins. So if you have toxins in your brain and you get into a really deep sleep pattern, the brain will actually shrink. It'll help squeeze toxins out of your brain, which is now going to help your brain function better. So when we think of this collectively, when we think of the system playing a role in your overall cellular energetics, when we think of the system playing a role in how well you sleep, and then how well you sleep playing a role in your general maintenance repair of your body and getting toxins out of your brain, it makes all the sense in the world that you would be fatigued, right? And that's a big thing that we're looking at, is again, getting back into fixing the system. Now, I also want you to understand, I've done multiple videos on this earlier in the year, is that when you think of your hormonal system, I want you to also recognize that your hormonal system is a response system. So in other words, when your hormonal system is off, the problem really isn't the hormonal system. The problem is whatever is triggering the hormonal system to respond with the lack of vitality that you're probably dealing with based on this. So when we think of that, like the most common triggers that I see from women in my clinic would be gut infections. It could be infections anywhere in the body, but most notably gut infections. It could be food sensitivity, recognizing that about 86% of the people who do have a food sensitivity are asymptomatic. So it's not like you eat the food, you feel terrible right after, but you eat the food and it's driving an inflammatory response, and that inflammatory response is then triggering a hormonal response. Also toxicity in the body, really anything that's going to be driving inflammation. So sometimes that's also poor diet, like the SAD diet, the acronym for the Standard American Diet, high in sugar, processed foods, caffeine, and alcohol, and all these different things that could be really triggering this for you. But the great news with all of this is you can overcome this. And regardless of what symptoms that you refer to as menopause symptoms, remember that there's like the 10 or 15% of the people who don't have symptoms, short of they don't have a monthly cycle and they can't conceive anymore. Well, most women that I've worked with, they're really happy to have those two symptoms, but the other symptoms no woman wants, and you don't want, right? But the thing though is to really overcome that, it means that you're looking at your hormonal system very comprehensively. I'm always doing a 24-hour urine collection where I'm looking at literally through to 32 different hormones, how your kidneys are affecting your hormonal system, how your phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification pathways are affecting your hormones, as well as inflammatory responses, chronic disease risk factors, and more, because you really want to understand what's going on. And then what I typically do from there is pay attention to body signs to understand what your triggers are. So ultimately, you can get on a protocol that helps support your hormonal system naturally, and also then really get a recognition of what are your triggers and addressing those appropriately. So you kind of put that all together, and guess what? You provide an opportunity for yourself to escape the fatigue, to enjoy higher levels of cellular energetics, to enjoy better sleep, to enjoy the maintenance and repair of the high immune response with a deep sleep cycle, and to enjoy the toxic cleansing of your brain on a nightly basis. All of these things have a positive impact on levels of fatigue that you could be dealing with today. Yeah. So, and a couple things I'll note before I finish up today. I'll put a link down in the bottom where you can get a free copy of the of my ebook, which is called "Fat, Fatigued, and Frustrated." I'm a best-selling author with that, and it is an action step guide for all the fundamentals that you can actually begin to utilize it as to kind of set a foundation for changing what's going on for you hormonally. And when you do get that book, you'll also be put on the Menopause Morning list, where what I'll do is I'll reach out to you and let you know what the next subject line for the Menopause Morning is going to be. And that way you're top of mind as far as when the Menopause Morning is coming up and what the subject line is going to be, because obviously different subjects will have a different priority for you. And then also, I do this every Tuesday, typically at 9 a.m. They're usually live. The only time they're not live is if I'm traveling, and so sometimes they are recordings, but usually live. And I'm always on here live, so you can ask questions and make comments for me to answer personally. But if you're not catching this live and you're watching a replay, please put your comment or your question below, and I will be happy to address that personally. So with that said, I want you to recognize that you have the power to change the levels of fatigue you're dealing with. Now, and just I guess the big question is, what if you really look at what's going on comprehensively hormonally, or what if you don't? I know you really, you don't want to actually continue with fatigue, and you can actually do something to turn this around for yourself. And so the power is in your hands, and there's weekly information to support this every Tuesday, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Have a great week.